So after 2 years of not presenting, I picked this weekend to lose a voice. So hopefully you can hear me all right with limited croaky voice. So sorry about that. It's not drink induced either. There's a bug going around. Right, I'll get started. So thank you for coming. Today we're going to talk about how we transformed our clients' data integrity. A long catchy title that I didn't write. And today we're just going to talk about a number of problems that clients have had, things that we've built for them, aiming at a specific area later on. And the demos that I talk about are Dataverse, but we are wider than that, but it's got an easier user interface than most other things to show. So that's why a lot of the things I talk about Dataverse, but we are wider than that. So just a quick intro into me and Mark. So I'm the development team leader at Data8, Business Apps MVP since this year. And my colleague Mark is the chief technologist, and again, got awarded Business Applications MVP as well. So as the two of us be doing some talking about the technologies that we've been around and what we do. So what we're going to talk about for the next 20 minutes is a bit of who we are and what we do. The stand is just there, so if we run out of time, we're going to be there all day, so feel free to come over. There is swag to give away as well, so if at the very least you want is someone to go and clean your keyboard, come and grab us and you can clean your keyboard. And then we're just going to talk about things that we've faced recently, some couple of use cases, how we fixed it, and then if there's time, have a little chat and see what we can work out and see if there's anything that, any questions that you've got. So I'll let an introduction to us and what we do. So I'm not going to read through the list. There's a lot of text on the next few slides. I'm not reading through it all. The point of it is to show that we're established, and if there's been an issue that we've seen at some point, we've probably dealt with it. We've probably built some sort of solution around it. So, I mean, the key ones in there is security accreditation. That's the thing that everybody cares about. We understand that as data processors, that's a major thing. So we do everything we possibly can to reassure people that we understand the idea of data security. And yeah, we're a Microsoft Gold Partner ISV and in App Source if you are in the Power Platform space. So what we do, I did intend on a bigger screen than that, so that's not particularly helpful. The point is, there's lots of stuff. There's all sorts of varieties of problems that we've solved over time. It could be addresses, it could be simple data in the same place where it lives. It could be a case of moving it somewhere else. We're not just Microsoft platform, so I can say dirty words like Salesforce today, and then we do things like Salesforce and Oracle and all the other systems as well. But obviously today with the event that it's on, it's more of a Microsoft-focused response on that. So some of the problems that we've seen recently is that nobody ever wants to get rid of any data. Somebody somewhere always says they find a use for it. The newer data, yeah, you understand that, but then some old data that people just simply don't want to let go of. It could be 10, 15 years old, and some people just want to hold on to it. Alongside that, you've got lots of different systems, lots of different technologies. So again, some of your systems might be really old that have very, very limited integration. Some are new, and then also acquisitions. Acquisitions bring on a whole new set of challenges with new bits of technology, and you want to try and get them together. People store data in different ways. There's Dataverse, like we've said, there's SQL, there's all different database technologies. We know people still use Excel, but we'll move on. And then things like SharePoint and all things like that. And when you combine all those things, what you get is two real major problems, which is there's dupes across it all. At some point, you want to get this single silo of data from everywhere. And then within that, the data quality itself can be poor. So you've got two problems there that sound small, but actually are on a huge scale that can be difficult to fix, and you've got to think about how you approach it. So the sort of job that we see quite a lot, this is the sort of thing that we do, sort of bread and butter, day in, day out, is this idea of taking multiple data sources from different areas, and in this case, bringing them into Dataverse. One-off import, sorting the data out, transforming it. And even though that's just an arrow that doesn't look like it does much, within that arrow, we're doing checking the emails are right, checking the telephones are right, checking that if you were to send a letter to that address, it would get to that person. If there's bank details in there for things like direct debits, checking that that's actually real, because those things are crucial. As well as things like deceased checking, because again, if you've got an old data set, there's no point bringing in 50% dead people, because all it does is bloats whatever your end storage capacity is going to be. So what we end up with is just Dataverse, in this case, as a single source of truth. And we've got a tool that does that. We've had that for a number of years now, and it's been tried and tested and worked very well, called Duplicare, which brings all these tools together. And that's been in the market for, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 years now, and it's done very well, and it's been industry leading in what it does. But just when you think you've looked at people's problems and given a good solution, people come in and they go, yeah, we've got bigger problems, even more, and I want to try and, how can we solve even bigger problems than that? So some extra difficulties that we've been given in the past is to move it all to one area is great if all those systems are going, because you to take it out of one, put it in another one and finish it. That's not the case. People will say that that system wants to stay alive, and I need to bear that in mind in whatever I decide to do, because they're integral to what I'm doing. And people don't like change. People don't have the resource to change all that. So the data is in there and it's stuck, but we've got to try and deal with that problem. But because those systems are used, the data is still changed regularly. So whatever work you do initially to bring it to a single environment, you need to think that it could already be out of date. And then you've got your marketing team, in our case, who come and shout at me and say, I want to email everybody and I want to do it now, and I don't care that you've got all these systems, just give me a list of emails. So to try and get them all together is difficult, and then someone throws a spanner in the works of something like, oh, we've got a new data source, can you just import it, assuming that that's an easy task to do and people don't understand the scale of things they're doing. So the thing that we've seen, and we've seen a lot more of this recently, is an idea of an ongoing master data management and handling it moving forward. So the example that we've seen, and we see this quite a lot now, is that we'll do an initial one, like we've done earlier, everything goes in and Dataverse hosts the data. Well, then actually what we'll do is we'll get rid of the 3, but those 2 are still alive. So those 2 want to keep running. So then you've got to think, right, how am I going to deal with that? So the first thing that we look at do is we find the delta of it. The delta is the difference of that thing, because if that ERP system is tens of millions of records big, we don't want to be dealing with tens of millions every day, because only 4 or 5% of that could have changed. So what we'll do is we'll work at getting the delta of it out, and then again, that same cleansing, standardization, problem fixing will fit within those arrows, and it makes it look like it's not doing a lot for the size of the arrow that it is. And then what we'll do is, let me just move my slide around slightly. And then the extra caveat that somebody threw onto us one day, and this was a few years ago, which was a nice, minor, casual conversation, was, oh yeah, we want it to feed back out again. So now not only have I got these data sources alive and what they want to do, it's going into Dataverse, but then marketing might do an email campaign, that email address changes or whatever, they change it in Dataverse, and then they want it back out to the respective systems, and this cycle gets created of how we handle that data. So what we did is we planned with customers, we worked out customer requirements, we think what works against the market, and we sort of built it together, and internally and externally now we're calling it Duplicare MDM. So it's sort of an extension on top of the Duplicare technology. So if you weren't to use whatever technology you're using, the standard go-to, a lot of the things that people would use at this point is things like Azure Data Factory. To do all that, manipulate it in Azure and do lots of things. If you want to say a simple sentence, which a client will say to us, which you can't, one sentence can sound so complex without realizing it. It's something like, I want to dedupe all my accounts with a fuzzy name. It sounds so simple, right? But actually, for you to then put any sort of fuzzy technology into Azure Data Factory and bring it together, I mean, that's a scale of thing I don't want to think about. But because we've got this tried and tested Duplicare, this is now a layer on top of that. So we've got a user interface that we can do that. So you literally build a criteria to say that is a duplicate based on a fuzzy company name, and all sorts of logic behind that. And there's 15 years of experience between us all in building that data. But then you get more complex than that. So what you want to say is actually there's a hierarchy involved because data isn't flat, data is structured. So now, as well as you deduping at account level, you want to dedupe at the contact level and maintain that hierarchy from the ERP records. I keep saying ERP because that's the use case we normally talk about. So I can see there that I've got active records doing a fuzzy person name match, simple as that. And then people like to go crazy and go even more complex. So I won't go into too much, but that's things like initial name match with supporting information, be it a phone number or an email or something to make that be a person. So what does that look like? So the sort of problems that we've solved, and we've got a number of clients that use this very, very heavily, is if I was to combine this in sort of an Excel spreadsheet just to give you a point, and hopefully you can see it on the screen, like I say, I thought the screen might be a little bit bigger, is that we've got 3 different ERP sources here, 3 different IDs and 3 different names, but they're the same. They are the same from all your systems, and you want them to be the same in whatever your master data source is going to be. So what we do there is we'll do things like, firstly, Check Data Limited is a company, just gives you an idea that actually don't know where that's come from, that is it real or not. And then we can apply all sorts of clever little granular rules on every column and map it to whatever you want it to be. So what I mean by that in this case is the account name becomes what we think is the registered name. So Data Rate Limited is probably the best name there, so we use that. Whereas ERP IDs, you might want to reference back to those other systems so you can't separate it. But then you might want to go stages further. So again, we mentioned this idea of hierarchy. So left 2 columns, you can see are, again, those same source records, but then we've got names. So we've got fuzzy name match with Matt Beard working towards in the same account. So what we do is we take all our data together, we apply all the rules, but again, because the rules can be so granular, you gain benefit from that data that you didn't necessarily realise. So what you can see here is that Matthew becomes the winner on that one because that's the most common and the longest, probably what I want because that works when I combine all the data. With email address, even though I've got 1 column of standardised email, actually what I've done here is split them apart because they're both important. We've already done that email check, so we know they're both real. So to throw them away seems daft just because you've only got 1 email field. So instead we have this idea of importance based on how many times it's seen. So the Matt B one goes into email 1, but let's move email 2. Let's move it to email 2 just to keep it, just in case. And then total spend is actually a sum because what that highlights is, let's say ERP 3 is an acquisition. They've not spent very much at that business, but in your other businesses, they've spent, 17.5 grand. So when you combine that to be 17.6, you can actually see that they're a bigger spender than you realise when you look at your single data sets. And that may help your team or whoever you've got decide differently on what you're going to do. But then we have the problem of delta. This data changes over time. So, where have I gone? Okay. So what we have here is the second record changes. Something happens, whatever that data system is. Email changes, total spend increases. So what we want to do, because marketing might be using that total spend as some sort of category of why they're marketing to it, that needs to be as quickly as possible updated in your master data, because otherwise your segmentation might be wrong. So if we blend that in and the rule changes, what we see on the left-hand side, sorry, I keep moving away from the mic. What we see on the left-hand side is the record as it was, but the data's changed. So now we've recalculated it. So that's on the fly. That's the second the change comes in, the change is fed into whatever your source is, so in this case Dataverse, and upon literal save of the record, it's recalculated and you've got the data available to you as quick as you possibly can. So you can see that the email addresses are flicked because the one we see more common is moved around. And the total spend is, again, summed, but you can now see that it's summed immediately to what it's doing. And yeah, so that is the idea of what this tool does. That's one of the things that we solve for lots of people. We've got estate agents, builders using it, a variety of different people that it works very well. And I think 8 or 9 sources every 10 minutes, those sorts of date levels of what we're talking about. And yeah, so what happens though is that still people will come in and they'll go, what if? So people will still try and find more ways to break it. And we've got all sorts of complex scenarios that, for the purposes of a 20-minute session, I can't really go into. But what it shows is that we've thought about those scenarios, we can handle it, we've got pretty solid ways of dealing with it and feeding it back to people. So yeah, feeding those Dataverse shaders back into ERP is handled, so you might have your own processes, you might want to get a spreadsheet or whatever. ERP changes could potentially cause duplicates in your master data system, so it needs to handle that and again have a single customer view within that. And on the flip side of that, what previously was matched on a rule now isn't matched on a rule because a new piece of information has come in, so we break that apart and make that its own separate contact or its own account. And then yeah, the one we get a lot is, well actually this works very well every day, but I'd like it within half an hour, so could you please do it within half an hour? So all those problems are things that we've faced, that we've handled well. And yeah, when you combine the ability to assign all that very clever, fuzzy logic we've built over time into a data factory pipeline or in that sort of scenario, and then apply granular rules on every single column, that's generally how we will fix the client's data, as well as maintain its integrity. So, I mean, that's it for slides. We can have a discussion if there's questions. There is a slide deck of me in Florida. And yeah, with that, any questions from anybody else? No? Well, like I say, we'll be over there. There's no point me standing here when I've got to stand 50 meters away. But if you've got any questions, if you want anything, even if you just want a screen cleaner, please, because I don't want to drag them for 6 hours back home in the car. So, thank you very much.